Did medieval women dream of being perpetually 16? Were they obsessed with tiny feet and the perfect arch? Let's dive into the utterly bizarre and surprisingly detailed world of medieval beauty standards, a realm where virginity was a superpower and thighs were the ultimate prize. Imagine a world obsessed with sculpting the ideal woman, not with chisels and clay, but with words, paintings, and a whole lot of very specific measurements. Forget Instagram filters, we're talking about a meticulously crafted aesthetic that dictated everything from what a woman wore to how she moved. This wasn't about chasing a fleeting trend, it was a deeply ingrained belief system, a cultural blueprint for feminine perfection, and it's far stranger than you might think. Let's start with the legs. Seriously, legs. In the early days of medieval literature and art, authors were obsessed with documenting the length, fullness, and straightness of a woman's legs. It wasn't about athletic prowess or practicality, it was about sheer, unadulterated leg envy. Geoffrey, a writer of the time, deliberately left the specifics vague, daring his audience to fill in the gaps. It was a game, a challenge to the imagination. But when he did decide to be explicit, he'd gush about the fine length of his beauty's shins, practically drooling over the detail. Matchout, another writer, took a different approach. He'd mention the legs as a separate body part, happily calling them well-shaped, and then let the reader do the heavy lifting of imagining their glorious proportions. Then there were the thighs. Oh, the thighs. They were the titillation that kicked off the whole beauty parade, the initial spark of desire. Authors uniformly praised them length, fullness, straightness, and sometimes, just for good measure, a little straightness. Geoffrey, when he felt the need to be blunt, would declare the fine length of his beauty's shins, practically begging his audience to visualize the scene. Matchout, ever the diplomat, would simply call them well-shaped, trusting his readers to conjure the image themselves. It was a clever tactic, a way to avoid being accused of being too explicit while still conveying the desired effect. Now, let's talk about feet. Don't scoff, foot size was a surprisingly important detail. Authors systematically described the ideal small feet with a uniformity that's almost unsettling. Some called them dainty, others praised long, straight toes. But then, just when you think you've grasped the concept, Matchout swoops in with a flourish, dedicating more space to the feet than to the thighs, legs, or hips combined. He describes them as the feet, arched, plump, and well-formed, seemingly shod with exquisite shoes. It's a bizarre shift in focus, a testament to the sheer importance placed on this particular body part. Next up, age. This is where things get really interesting. Medieval people didn't view age the way we do. Years on the planet didn't automatically equate to wisdom or experience. For men crafting the ideal woman, youth was paramount, inextricably linked to beauty. A woman had to be not just young but sexually inexperienced. In short, she needed to be a maiden. What exactly was a maiden? Think of it as a medieval teenager, someone on the cusp of adulthood but not quite there yet. They were no longer children, but hadn't yet reached full maturity. Maidenhood was a transitional stage, a shimmering space between childhood and womanhood. But it wasn't just about age, it was about a particular state of being, a virginity that implied a purity of spirit and a distance from the messy realities of the adult world. This concept of perfection was deeply intertwined with the medieval understanding of bodily humors, the belief that the body was governed by four fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Children were considered hotter and drier than adults, while aging and death were associated with wetness. Girls, being less wet, were considered more masculine, possessing a natural ability to burn off excess humors. Menarche, the onset of menstruation, marked the transition from maidenhood to womanhood, signifying the end of the hot and dry phase and the beginning of a process of wetting down. Bartholomeus Anglicus, a late 14th century scholar, put it perfectly: a maid is called Puella as it were clean and pure as the black of the eye. For among all that is loved in a wench chastity and cleanness is loved most. Puella is a name of soundness without whim flaw and also of honesty honor. A maiden was young, a virgin, but also marriageable, a desirable commodity in a society where a woman's value was largely determined by her ability to produce heirs. But here's the kicker: maidens were considered beautiful because they weren't sexual. It's a strange paradox, a deliberate construction of feminine ideal that actively excluded the messy, complicated realities of female sexuality. They were kind, calm, chaste, pure, delicate, modest, and humble, everything a man might desire in a wife, but without any of the inconvenient baggage of being a fully realized person. It was a manufactured perfection, a carefully crafted illusion designed to meet the desires of men, not to reflect the natural complexities of women. Philosophers reinforced this idea. Maidenhood was the perfect age for women because they were mentally developed and feminine, but also, crucially, aligned with men in terms of humoral composition. This wasn't just a personal preference, it was a deeply held belief, a cornerstone of medieval thought. And what about marriage? It wasn't a happy ending for these idealized women. Marriage was a trap, a gilded cage that threatened to extinguish their maidenhood and transform them into something undesirable. A woman who married or even flirted with marriage lost her status as a desirable maiden. The moment she became a wife, she was cold and wet, her femininity compromised, her beauty fading. This fear of losing maidenhood was reflected in the art of the time. Eve, the first woman, became the ultimate visual representation of this ideal. She was depicted as young, beautiful, and eternally innocent, a symbol of both temptation and purity. Artists consistently portrayed her with blonde hair, high cheekbones, and a flawless complexion, a visual embodiment of the medieval beauty standard. Other beautiful religious women, the Virgin Mary, the martyr saints, followed a similar pattern. They were depicted as young, elegant, and perpetually untouched by the corrupting influences of the world. Saint Agatha, for example, was shown with her breasts miraculously regrown after being brutally mutilated, a testament to her purity and virtue. But let's not forget the beautiful married women. Helen of Troy, Guinevere, Alisane, and May, they were all stunning, undeniably gorgeous, and utterly dangerous. Their beauty was a liability, a source of conflict and ultimately destruction. Helen's love for Paris sparked a war, Guinevere's affair with Lancelot brought down Camelot, and Alisane and May humiliated their older husbands with their beauty and wit. These women were femmes fatales, beautiful women whose allure led to ruin. The art of the time reflected this duality. While the idealized maiden was a constant presence, these married beauties were often portrayed as alluring and seductive, a stark reminder of the potential consequences of female desire. The obsession with maidenhood extended beyond aesthetics. It was deeply intertwined with religious beliefs about sex and morality. Virginity was seen as a shield against the corruption of the mortal world, a pathway to spiritual purity. To engage in sexual activity was to surrender to temptation, to risk losing one's soul. Virginity, in contrast, was a sign of moral virtue and a connection to the divine. The Pearl poet captured this sentiment perfectly. His grieving father is reunited with his deceased daughter, not as a toddler, but as a beautiful maiden, eternally young and untouched by the sins of the world. Her beauty was a testament to her innocence, a reward for her purity, and a symbol of her eternal salvation. And it's not just in poetry. The end of times, according to medieval theology, would be a grand spectacle of resurrection. The dead would rise from their graves in their perfect age, reflecting their earthly beauty. The ideal age was, therefore, 33, mirroring the age of Christ at his death. Now, consider this: did most medieval people actually believe in these standards? Did they genuinely strive to emulate the ideal maiden with her tiny feet, perfect legs, and unwavering virginity? The answer, according to historical evidence, is a resounding no. Life expectancy was surprisingly high, around 32, though that figure is heavily skewed by the high infant mortality rate. People married in their 20s, had children, and lived relatively long lives. The idea of a perpetually 16-year-old maiden was a fantasy, a construct of men's imaginations, but the fantasy had a powerful influence. The medieval beauty standard wasn't just about physical appearance. It was about controlling women's lives, shaping their roles in society, and reinforcing patriarchal power structures. It was a way of defining femininity, of limiting women's agency, and of ensuring their desirability as wives and mothers. And it's fascinating to see how this ideal persisted through the centuries, influencing art, literature, and even our own modern conceptions of beauty. Eve, the eternally young and beautiful maiden, continues to haunt our imaginations, a reminder of a time when women were defined by their purity, their innocence, and their utter lack of personality. So the next time you scroll through Instagram, searching for the perfect selfie, remember the medieval obsession with the ideal woman. Remember the tiny feet, the long legs, and the unwavering belief in the power of maidenhood. It's a bizarre, unsettling, and utterly captivating story, a testament to the enduring power of fantasy and the enduring human desire to control the image of beauty. But let's be honest, isn't it a little bit creepy that a society could be so obsessed with constructing a perfect woman, a woman who essentially exists only in the minds of men? And wouldn't it be fascinating to see what happens when we finally dismantle that construct and embrace the messy, complicated, and wonderfully imperfect reality of being a woman?